A 4-year-old boy vanished in a crowded supermarket aisle in broad daylight, and not a single person saw how it happened. Before we dive in, leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? And don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow, we've got another mind-blowing story for you. It was a gray November afternoon in 1991, the kind of day where the sky hangs low over the Oregon hills, heavy with rain that never quite commits to falling. The sort of day where the cold gets into your sleeves and people decide it's easier to run errands than sit at home staring out the window. In this town, that meant one thing: Wagner's Supermarket, off Highway 58. It wasn't fancy. Fluorescent lights, scuffed linoleum, a squeaky automatic door that stuck every third time it opened. But it was where everyone went. It was where paychecks turned into groceries, where kids begged for cereal with cartoon mascots, where you could catch up on half the town's gossip in a single trip through the checkout line. Inside, the air smelled like citrus cleaner and warm donuts from the bakery case near the front. Shopping carts rattled and squealed. Somewhere near the back, a radio played muffled soft rock through a tinny speaker just loud enough to fill the silence between price checks and page calls. Employees who were there that day still remember how normal it all felt. A cashier named Denise recalled an older man arguing about double coupons at Register 3. A teenage bagger, Tyler, remembered someone dropping a jar of pickles in aisle 4. The manager on duty was worrying about an upcoming shipment and a broken freezer door. Nobody walked into that store thinking this would be the day people would still be talking about 30 years later. Just after 3:15 p.m., the automatic doors slid open, and a young woman stepped inside, balancing her purse, her keys, and the small hand of a 4-year-old boy. Her name was Noah Briggs. His name was Noah. Noah was small for his age, with a mop of brown hair that always seemed like it needed a trim, and eyes that were too big for his face. That day he wore a puffy red jacket, corduroy pants, and sneakers with little stars on the sides that lit up when he walked. A neighbor would later say you always heard him before you saw him, laughing, narrating everything he did, asking questions that never seemed to stop. They weren't there for much. Milk, oatmeal, applesauce, a few things for dinner. The kind of list you scribble on an envelope before running out the door. People noticed them without really noticing. Denise, the cashier, remembered Noah pointing at a candy display near the registers, asking if he could have the one with the bear on it. She smiled at him, then went back to scanning groceries. A young mother in line behind them thought he was cute. The way he kept jumping in place, lighting up his shoes just to see the tiny burst of light under his feet. Lauren took a cart, lifted Noah so he could sit in the child's seat, then set him back down when he insisted on walking like a big kid. She held his hand as they passed the bakery case. The woman behind the counter offered him a free cookie. He chose chocolate chips, crumbs already dropping down the front of his jacket before they reached the produce section. Aisle after aisle, the store swallowed them up like it always did. Cereal on the left, coffee and tea on the right. Laundry detergent, paper towels, canned soup stacked in perfect pyramids. To anyone watching, it was just another mom and her little boy doing what families do. Somewhere around 3:20 p.m., according to the security logs and receipts, Lauren and Noah turned down the snack aisle. That's where the story stops being ordinary. The security camera above aisle 7 was old, the kind of thing you'd expect to see in a low-budget home video. The image is grainy, tilted slightly to the left, with the timestamp blinking in the corner. But if you watch closely, you can still see them. A small figure in a red jacket rounds the end cap first, feet bouncing a little as he walks. That's Noah. A few steps behind him, head bent over a crumpled piece of paper, is Lauren, checking her list. Noah turns into the aisle and disappears briefly behind a tower of stacked potato chip boxes. Lauren follows, her cart's wobbly front wheel making a tiny shudder in the frame. And then, nothing. 32 seconds pass. When Lauren appears again on camera, she's walking faster. Her head is up now, eyes moving from one side of the aisle to the other. The cart moves ahead, but Noah isn't in front of it anymore. He isn't beside it. He isn't in the corner of the frame. He's gone. Later, when investigators asked Lauren about that moment, she said at first she didn't panic. Noah was the kind of child who darted toward anything colorful or interesting. A cartoon character on a box, a toy left in the wrong section. He was drawn to them like a magnet. She assumed he'd slipped around the corner into the next aisle. Maybe the cereal aisle. Maybe the one with the crackers and cookies. She called his name once, lightly. "Noah? Hey, buddy, where'd you go?" No answer. She pushed the cart faster, turned the corner. Nothing. Just an older woman deciding between brands of oatmeal and a teenage boy tossing something with a yellow label into his basket. She checked the next aisle and the next. "Noah?" Her voice got louder, sharper. She left the cart near the end cap and started walking without it. She checked the toy rack near the front of the store. The display of plastic cars and coloring books the manager kept close to the registers to keep kids occupied. Empty. By 3:22 p.m., barely 7 minutes after she'd walked through the door with her son, Lauren Briggs's heart was pounding in a way she'd never felt before. Witnesses would later say they noticed the change before they understood the reason. They saw a young woman moving up and down the aisles, eyes wide, mouth tight, calling a name they didn't catch at first. They saw the way her hands started to shake when she grabbed an employee's arm near the deli and said, "I can't find my son." "How old is he?" the employee asked. "4," she said. "He was just here. Red jacket. His name is Noah." The deli worker's expression shifted. He wiped his hands on his apron and looked up and down the row. No child, no splash of red. Another worker nearby, stocking cheese, shook her head. "I haven't seen any kids in a few minutes," she said. That phrase, "a few minutes," would play on repeat in investigators' minds later. Because in a place like that, in the middle of the afternoon, a few minutes is a long time for a child to be gone. Lauren made it to the front of the store, breathless now. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes wet. She didn't wait for her turn. She stepped directly to the counter where the customer service clerk stood and said, "You need to call my son over the speaker. He's lost. I can't find him anywhere." The clerk hesitated for just a second, then picked up the phone. The store's intercom crackled to life, that familiar tone that told shoppers a price check was coming. Only this time, it wasn't about a sale or a manager's request. "Attention, Wagner's customers," the voice said. "We're looking for a little boy named Noah. He's 4 years old and wearing a red jacket. If you see him, please bring him to the front desk." That was the moment when everything changed. People who had been comparing brands now abandoned their carts. A man in work boots left his basket sitting in the middle of an aisle and started checking between shelves. A grandmother, who was halfway through picking out canned vegetables, looked up and set her items aside. One by one, strangers began walking the aisles, peering around corners, checking behind displays and open freezer doors. Employees checked the restroom, the stockroom, and the office. Someone ran outside to scan the sidewalk and the parking lot, half expecting to see a red jacket weaving between cars. They didn't. An assistant manager hurried to the front doors and, without waiting for permission, flipped the lock. Customers already outside couldn't get back in. The ones inside were gently asked to stay put. If a child had wandered toward an exit, they didn't want him slipping through a sea of moving bodies and out into the open road. A produce clerk would later describe a feeling that settled over the store right then, like the building itself was holding its breath. The usual sounds were still there. The hum of lights, the squeak of wheels, the soft murmur of people talking. But under it all was a new sound, thin and strained. Lauren's voice cracked as she called her son's name. "Noah! Noah!" No giggle answered. No little feet pattered across the tile. In those first 10 minutes, everyone in that store believed one thing, that he had to be there somewhere, that he'd turn up hiding behind a cereal display, or crouched under a clothing rack, or examining some interesting label at his own eye level. That's what kids do. They get distracted. They wander. They hide. But minute after minute passed, and the search turned frantic. Every aisle was swept. Every corner checked. Employees ducked behind the bakery racks, into the dairy cooler, even inside the walk-in freezer. A stock boy opened the trash bins one by one, praying he wouldn't find what his mind had started to imagine. No red jacket, no sneakers with flashing stars, no Noah. Somewhere around 3:30 p.m., the manager made the call that would officially change this from a lost child situation to something else. He picked up the phone, dialed 3 numbers, and said the words no one ever wants to say. "We have a missing child." The dispatcher asked for details. Age, description, last known location, the name of the store. The line between ordinary and nightmare solidified with every answer. By the time the first patrol car pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing softly against the gray sky, the inside of Wagner's supermarket had shifted from weekend routine to something like a held note of fear. Customers pressed back against the walls near the front. Employees lingered in clusters, eyes red, waiting to be told what to do next. For investigators, this was the beginning. For everyone else in that building, it felt like the end of something. The illusion that in a place filled with people, filled with eyes and cameras and fluorescent light, a child was automatically safe. Because in a span of less than 15 minutes, in a supermarket full of witnesses, a 4-year-old boy had simply disappeared. Police entered Wagner's supermarket at 3:37 p.m., and the moment the officers stepped inside, they could feel it. That strange, heavy quiet that settles over a place when everyone inside is holding on to the same fear. Shoppers stood gathered near the registers, unsure whether to wait or help. Employees lingered by the aisles, eyes wide, hands shaking slightly as adrenaline started to fade into shock. The first responding officer, Deputy Mark Rowan, didn't waste any time. He walked straight to the customer service counter, where the manager pointed toward a young woman near the carts. She was standing still, almost rigid, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other gripping the handle of an empty shopping cart, like she needed the weight of it to stay upright. "That's the mother," the manager whispered. She can't find him." When Rowan approached her, Lauren didn't seem to notice him at first. Her eyes were moving over the store like she expected Noah to appear out of thin air. When Rowan said her name, she finally turned, and the expression on her face made him pause. It wasn't panic anymore. Not the frantic kind that comes with losing sight of a child for a second. This was something colder, a realization that something was deeply, terribly wrong. She told him everything she remembered, coming into the store, taking the aisle, looking down at the list. Looking up, he was gone. Rowan asked her to repeat it twice, then a third time, standard procedure. But each repetition seemed to drain her more. She kept saying the same words. It was seconds, just seconds. He was right there. The officers began clearing the store aisle by aisle. Customers were asked to remain inside and open their bags. The doors stayed locked. By 3:45 p.m., the supermarket was no longer a supermarket. It was officially a crime scene. 2 officers headed toward the back, through the stockroom, past pallets of canned goods, down the narrow hallway to the loading bay. The door to the outside was propped open slightly, catching a faint chill from the November air. A delivery worker who'd been unloading earlier swore he hadn't seen any children back there. But the officers noticed something. A small scuff of dirt near the crack of the door, just enough to show someone, maybe small, maybe not, had been near it recently. They followed footprints, but the gravel outside was uneven and kicked up. Nothing definitive. Inside, another officer reviewed the surveillance tapes. Wagner's had only 3 working cameras: the front entrance, the registers, and aisle 7. The tape was rewinding when he noticed something strange. At the exact moment Noah disappeared on aisle 7 camera, a tall figure wearing a gray jacket crossed the background at the far end of the aisle. The footage was too blurry to tell if it was a man or woman, too far to see the face, too grainy to see whether they were holding anything. But what unsettled the officer wasn't what the person did. It was what the person didn't do. They never turned their heads. Not once. Not toward Lauren, not toward the aisle, not toward the wandering 4-year-old who should have been visible in their periphery. They walked with purpose, straight, unbroken, like they'd come for something specific or someone. When the officer replayed it, frame by frame, a chill crept over him. The timing was too close to be coincidence. Meanwhile, employees were being questioned. Most hadn't seen anything unusual. A few had heard Lauren calling her son's name before the announcement over the speaker. A young employee named Tyler said something he didn't think mattered at first. He'd been stocking shelves near aisle 9 when he felt someone brush past him, quickly, almost impatiently. He hadn't looked up, assuming it was a customer rushing through. But now he wasn't so sure. It felt tense, he said, like whoever it was didn't want to be noticed. Rowan took notes. Something in his gut tightened. At 3:50 p.m., 15 minutes into the official search, the fire department arrived with thermal scanners. They swept the freezers, the storage rooms, even the vents. Nothing. Officers checked every hiding place a child might crawl into. The cardboard baler, behind soda crates, under counters. Nothing. A supervisor climbed into the ceiling crawl space, expecting dust and insulation, and perhaps, in the back of his mind, something worse. But the space was empty. Outside, patrol cars circled the lot, checking for anyone leaving the store around the time Noah vanished. A few shoppers had left just before the doors were locked, but every one of them was stopped on the road. Questioned, their trunks opened, their bags searched. No one had a child with them. No one had seen one. One woman insisted she saw a man pacing near the soda machines outside before the police arrived. She thought he looked nervous, but she didn't think to mention it until now. Another man said he saw a rusty blue pickup peel out of the parking lot around the same time the announcement was made inside, but he wasn't sure of the exact minute. He didn't get a license plate, leads, but nothing solid, nothing provable. At 4:02 p.m., a full 20 minutes after Noah vanished, the store alarm shrieked through the building, triggered by the emergency exit in the rear of the building. Everyone froze. Officers rushed to the back. The emergency door stood slightly open, just an inch, rocking gently as cold wind rushed through the gap. A stack of cardboard beside it had been knocked over. Someone asked if Noah could have pushed it, opened it himself. But the answer was immediately clear. The emergency latch was mounted nearly 5 feet high. A 4-year-old couldn't reach it. A 4-year-old couldn't open it. When police checked the outside of the door, they found the most chilling detail of the day so far. A faint imprint in the dirt. Not a footprint. Not a child's shoe. A drag mark. A smooth, shallow line carved through the dirt, stretching several feet toward the back of the lot before it disappeared into gravel. Officers stared at it. No one spoke at first. It was the kind of mark made when something, or someone, was pulled. Deputy Rowan knelt beside it, tracing the disturbed earth with a gloved hand, and every instinct he had screamed the same thing. This wasn't a lost child. This wasn't wandering. Someone had taken Noah Briggs out of that store, and they did it fast, quiet, efficiently, like they had done it before, or planned to do it all along. The moment officers realized the emergency door had been opened from the inside, everything about the search shifted. What they were dealing with was no longer a missing child. It was an abduction. And not the chaotic, opportunistic kind. This was clean, quiet, calculated. At 4:08 p.m., detectives from Lane County arrived, their tires throwing gravel as they pulled into the lot. The parking area behind the store was already cordoned off with yellow tape. Officers moved carefully, scanning the ground for tire tracks, footprints, anything that might tell them which directions someone had fled. But the lot was a mess of overlapping patterns, deliveries, customers, employees coming and going. Any useful sign had been trampled or washed away by the earlier drizzle. It was as if whoever took Noah knew exactly how to disappear into noise. Inside, detectives began interviewing every person still in the store. Elderly couples who'd been in the produce section. A group of teenagers who were buying snacks after school. A mother with a toddler who'd been in the cereal aisle. None of them had seen a struggling child. None had heard a cry, not a whimper, not even a call for help. One woman said she remembered a cold draft near aisle 9, around the time of the announcement, as if a door had opened. But she couldn't place whether it was before or after Noah vanished. Another shopper said she thought she saw a man carrying something wrapped in a gray blanket near the back of the store earlier, but she admitted she might have imagined it. She never saw a face, never saw a child. Detectives wrote it all down anyway. Meanwhile, the grainy footage from aisle 7 was being rewound and replayed over and over. The more they watched it, the more disturbing the timeline became. Noah walks ahead, rounds the corner. Lauren follows. She disappears behind the camera's blind spot. But the space between those movements, the seconds where the camera view is blocked by product displays, those were the seconds a person could have reached out, lifted a child, turned, and walked away. It only took seconds. At 4:15 p.m., detectives gathered near the closed bakery counter, comparing notes. The same name kept coming up again and again in employee interviews. A man no one recognized, someone who wasn't a regular customer. He was tall, one clerk said. Gray jacket, dark cap. He kept his hands in his pockets. Another employee frowned. I think he was by the doors when I came back from break. I thought he was waiting for someone. A third said, he moved weird. Not fast, just deliberate. But each description was just slightly different. Cap or no cap, beard or clean shaven, taller or shorter. Grainy footage offered no clarity. The camera near the back of the store, the one that could have seen him closest, had been broken for 3 months. Detectives were trying to build a face out of smoke. Near the front of the store, Lauren sat on a folding chair someone had brought her. She was holding her son's little jacket, the red one with the stars on the sleeves. She kept pressing it to her chest, as if she could somehow hold on to him by holding on to the fabric. A detective knelt beside her, asking if Noah had any history of running off, hiding, playing pranks. No, she whispered. Her voice was hollow. He always holds my hand. Always. Except when he sees something he likes. He runs a little ahead. She squeezed the jacket tighter. He didn't run this far, she said. He wouldn't. Outside, the temperature had begun to drop, and clouds thickened over the hills. A helicopter arrived just before dusk, its blades chopping the air as it circled the area. Searchers spread out along the edges of the parking lot, scanning ditches, dumpsters, bushes, and the tree line that bordered the rear of the property. Officers knocked on the doors of every business in a 2-block radius, checking for witnesses. Noah wasn't in any of those places. At 4:40 p.m., a K-9 unit arrived. The dog was given Noah's jacket to smell, then released behind the building. Within seconds, it found a trail, straight toward the emergency exit. It sniffed, paced, circled. Officers held their breath. Then the dog did something unexpected. It stopped, turned, and walked in a perfect circle. Confused, the scent ended. Right there, just beyond the emergency door. The handler explained that this was uncommon, but not impossible. For the scent to vanish abruptly like that, one of 3 things must have happened. Noah was lifted off the ground, he was placed into a vehicle, or he was carried in a way that prevented scent from touching the earth. Any of those options meant only one thing. Noah did not leave that lot on his own feet. The dog suddenly perked up again, tugging toward a patch of gravel behind the store, where faint traces of tire tracks led toward the highway merged lane. But the tracks were too muddled to photograph, too distorted to identify a make or model. As the dog circled, officers noticed a single piece of debris half buried in the gravel, an old receipt, damp from the cold air. When they lifted it, they realized it wasn't from Wagner's. It was from a gas station across town, time-stamped 3:19 p.m. Exactly the minute Noah disappeared. Has someone dropped it? Has it blown here? Or had it been pulled from someone's pocket as they lifted a child into a vehicle? Detectives didn't know, but they kept it. By 5:00 p.m., the gray November sky was darkening fast. Rain threatened at the edges of the horizon. Emergency lights bounced off the pavement in cold flashes of red and blue. Officers from nearby towns arrived to help. One of them, an older deputy named Harris, stood staring at the grocery carts near the entrance. He later told investigators the scene felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. "Kids cry," he said. "Kids scream. Kids panic. But nobody heard anything. Nobody turned their heads. Nobody reacted." He shook his head slowly. "That means whoever took him knew how to keep him quiet. And that scares me more than anything else." Detectives reviewed the emergency door again. They found smudges on the inside, a partial palm print, smeared, too distorted to identify. On the outside of the doorframe, they found something else. A faint strand of fabric, no longer than a fingernail, caught in the metal hinge. It wasn't red. It didn't match Noah's jacket. It was gray, almost the exact shade of the jacket witnesses kept mentioning. Rain finally began to fall, light at first, then harder, washing away footprints, smudges, evidence. Officers threw up tents and tarps, but some of what they needed most was already gone. The lead detective stood in that cold rain, staring at the empty loading area and the long drag mark disappearing into gravel. He said later that he knew, right then, before the night had even fully arrived, that this case was not going to be solved quickly. Because whoever took Noah Briggs had planned this. They had watched. They had waited. They had chosen their moment. And they had walked out of a crowded supermarket with a 4-year-old child without a single person truly seeing them. Night fell faster than anyone expected. One moment the parking lot was just dim, washed in blue and red emergency lights. The next it felt swallowed by darkness, the kind that makes every sound sharper and every shadow look like it's moving. By 6 p.m., the rain had settled into a steady drizzle, blurring flashlights into halos and soaking through the jackets of every officer still searching the perimeter. Detectives knew the first hours after a child abduction were critical. Statistically, the window for recovery shrank with every passing minute. But even in those earliest hours, something about this case felt different. There were no screams, no witnesses, no trail. Just a gap in time, 30 seconds where Noah had existed in the world, and then simply didn't. Detectives Rowan and Harris walked the length of the rear wall of the supermarket again, flashlights cutting through the slanted rain. Every few feet they knelt, examining gravel, leaves, stray scraps of paper. But the rain was working against them. Anything fragile, hair, fibers, small prints, was already dissolving into mud. Inside the store, detectives continued questioning employees. The manager provided a list of everyone who'd been scheduled that day. Supervisors, baggers, cashiers, stockers. Most had been with the store for years. None had any disciplinary issues. None had left their positions at the time Noah vanished. But then the manager mentioned something that made both detectives turn sharply toward him. "There was a guy," he said, "a temp worker. He wasn't supposed to be here today. He picked up a short shift helping unload produce. I didn't even realize he'd come in." "What's his name?" Rowan asked. The manager hesitated, thinking back. I think it was Michael. Or Mitchell. Something like that. No last name. We contract temps through an agency. He wasn't one of our regulars." "Where is he now?" The manager swallowed. I don't know. He clocked out early, around 3, before the announcement. 3 p.m., 15 minutes before Noah disappeared. Detective Harris scribbled down every detail. Did he interact with the boy? With the mother? I don't think so. He was unloading boxes in the back. He seemed normal, quiet. Did he leave through the back door? The manager nodded slowly. Yes, that's the route temps usually take. Rowan exchanged a look with Harris, a look that said exactly what both were thinking. If someone knew the layout of the store, the blind spots, the loading bay, the emergency exit, it would be someone who worked there, even briefly. They requested the temp agency's roster immediately. Meanwhile, Lauren was moved to a quiet aisle where a paramedic could sit with her. Her breathing was shallow, hands trembling as she rested Noah's jacket in her lap. She hadn't spoken much since the first interview. Grief had settled over her like a weight, numb and suffocating. "Please find him," she whispered once, not even looking up. "Please, he's so little. He's so little." Outside, the search expanded beyond the parking lot. Officers moved into the tree line behind the store, weaving between dripping branches, calling Noah's name, even though they knew he wasn't going to come walking toward them. But calling him was better than silence. About 70 yards into the woods, an officer found something partially buried in pine needles. He called out, and Rowan rushed over, heart pounding. For a split second, he imagined the worst, a shoe, a scrap of fabric. But it wasn't that. It was a toy, a tiny plastic dinosaur, green with chipped paint along the tail. Rowan held it under the beam of his flashlight, a harmless object, completely unrelated, probably dropped by another child weeks ago. That's what he told himself. But when they brought it to Lauren, she covered her mouth and broke into sobs. "It's his," she whispered. "He brought it everywhere." Detectives exchanged looks again, this time darker, heavier. If the toy was here, in the woods behind the supermarket, then Noah had been here too. Whether he dropped it on his own or it fell during a struggle. Neither option felt any better than the other. Search teams pushed deeper into the trees. Footprints were impossible to read in the mud, but one officer thought he saw a heavy boot impression near a fallen log. Another noticed broken twigs leading downhill toward a drainage ditch. The trail didn't continue from there. It simply ended, just like the scent trail, just like everything else. Back at the store entrance, a man stepped forward as officers walked by. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. "Officer, I don't want to make trouble," he said, voice trembling. "But I think I saw something earlier." "What did you see?" The man hesitated. His eyes darted to the cordoned-off parking lot, then back to the officers. "A truck," he said finally. "Rusty blue pickup. Parked behind the store around 3:20. I thought it was a delivery, but it wasn't marked. No logo, and I didn't see a driver." "Did it leave?" "Yes. Fast. Like really fast. Tires screeched." "What direction?" "Toward the highway ramp." Rowan asked for more. License plate, dents, stickers. But the man shook his head helplessly. "I'm sorry. I didn't think to look." But it was something. Their first potential vehicle. At 7:12 p.m., rain was still pouring. Detectives gathered under the awning near the entrance. Rowan flipped through his notebook, then looked at the others. "We have a child who vanished in under a minute. We have a temp worker who left early and can't be reached. We have a possible suspect in a gray jacket. We have a toy in the woods. And we have a truck speeding away from the scene." He paused, letting those facts settle. This wasn't random. Harris nodded grimly. This was planned. And then he said what no one wanted to say out loud, but everyone already suspected. Someone was watching him. The rain intensified, drumming against the tin roof, drowning the quiet conversations of officers and store employees. For the first time since the search began, Lauren looked up, her eyes hollow, rimmed red. "Please," she whispered again, "please find my son." Detectives promised her they would, but none of them said aloud what they were thinking. Whoever took Noah had a head start, and head starts like this don't end well. By 10 p.m., the command post inside Wagner's had transformed into a wall of maps, photographs, and smeared ink from pens running low. Officers hovered over everything: highway routes, rural back roads, logging paths that branched off into the deep Oregon woods. The room buzzed with tension, but underneath it all was a quiet dread. The realization that the man in the gray jacket could be anywhere by now. Rowan stood over the blurry traffic camera still frame of the truck. He'd been staring at it for so long that the pixels had begun to blur together, but the outline never changed. A tall driver, a slumped shape beside him. The image burned into his mind like an imprint. A trooper approached from behind. "We traced the pickup. We think it might be registered under the name Samuel Crane. Same last name as the temp worker." Rowan nodded. "Do we have an address?" "A rented trailer outside Oak Ridge, about 30 minutes from here." Rowan didn't hesitate. "We're going, now!" Within minutes, 2 patrol cars, an unmarked sedan, and a county SUV were tearing through the rain-soaked streets toward the dark stretch of highway leading out of town. Wipers slapped rhythmically against glass. Radio chatter crackled through the vehicles. Updates, dispatch calls, warnings about slick roads. Harris sat beside Rowan, flipping through the thin file on Mitchell Crane. No criminal record, no known relatives, no permanent address. A ghost of a man drifting from temp job to temp job. "What are the chances this is the same Crane?" Harris asked. Rowan didn't look away from the road. "Right now? Too high to ignore." They reached the dirt road to the trailer 15 minutes later. The area was isolated, thick pines on both sides, branches leaning in close, as if trying to hide the structures from the world. The trailer itself sat near the tree line, a faint orange light glowing weakly through one grimy window. Rowan signaled for silence as they stepped out of the vehicles. The only sounds were rain dripping from the metal awning and the faint hum of a generator somewhere behind the property. They approached the door in formation. Harris reached out, feeling the handle. Cold, still. Inside, something thumped. Rowan froze. Everyone else did too. Another thump, softer this time, muffled, coming from the back room. Rowan drew his weapon. Harris did the same. An officer knocked loudly. "Police! Open the door!" No answer. Rowan nodded to the nearest officer. The door was kicked open. The trailer smelled like stale cigarettes and damp clothes. The air was thick and humid, as if someone had been living inside without heat or ventilation. The front room was cluttered with newspapers, crushed beer cans, piles of laundry. A small TV flickered static across the room. No one was in sight. But that sound, the thump, they had heard it. Rowan signaled for the others to split off and cover each room. The hallway was narrow and creaked under their boots. Rowan reached the back door. The thumping sound came again, sharper this time, like something knocking into wood. He braced himself and pushed the door open. The room was empty. Just a worn mattress on the floor, blankets tossed off to the side. A window cracked open, letting in cold air and the sound of rain. Harris pointed to the closet door. Something inside had shifted. Rowan placed his hand on the handle and pulled it open. Inside was a small boiler unit, rattling violently, shaking against the wooden frame. Every few seconds, it knocked into the wall. Thump, thump, thump. Not a person, not a struggle, just machinery. Harris let out a slow exhale, but Rowan didn't relax. "Where's Crane?" he whispered. The rest of the trailer revealed even more unease. On the kitchen counter sat a half-eaten sandwich, the bread still soft. In the sink, water dripped steadily from a faucet that had been left barely open. A jacket lay draped over a chair, gray wool, frayed cuffs. And on the table beside it, something caught Rowan's eye. A child's sock, small, white, with a faded blue stripe. His stomach flipped. Harris bagged it carefully, hands steady but jaw tight. They searched the trailer top to bottom again. No suspect, no child, no trace of where either had gone. But near the back door, they found muddy footprints, large, heavy, and leading away from the trailer into the dark stretch of forest behind it. Rowan stepped outside, rain tapping steadily against his hat. The beam of his flashlight cut through the trees, but the forest swallowed most of the light. The ground was soft and churned in places, as if someone had moved quickly through it hours earlier. A deputy approached from behind. "Detective," he said quietly, "we found something else." He held up a clear plastic bag. Inside it was a candy wrapper, animal crackers. Rowan closed his eyes briefly. Noah's favorite. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. "He was here," Rowan said softly. "Noah was here." Harris stepped up beside him, staring into the black expanse of forest. The trees seemed to breathe with the wind, bending slightly, dripping rain. "The footprints go straight in," Harris said. "But the forest is huge. Miles in every direction." Rowan nodded grimly. This was no longer a search near a store. This was no longer a matter of reviewing security footage. They were hunting a man who had hours of head start and a 4-year-old child who hadn't been seen alive since 3:20 p.m. Rowan lowered his voice. "He's moving," he said. "He's not staying anywhere more than a few minutes. He knew we'd come here." Harris looked at him. "You think he's watching us?" Rowan didn't answer, because deep in that forest, something moved. A branch snapped, a shadow shifted, the rain fell harder again, masking whatever sound came next. And in that moment, Rowan understood something with sudden clarity. Whoever took Noah wasn't just running. He was leading them somewhere. The forest behind the trailer stretched endlessly into darkness, the kind of woods where sound plays tricks on you, where a distant echo feels close, and a rustle in the branches could be wind, or something watching from just out of view. Officers formed a line, flashlights scanning the ground for footprints, broken twigs, anything to suggest a path. But the rain washed away clues almost as soon as they appeared. Rowan crouched near a patch of disturbed earth, tracing it with a gloved finger. The footprint was faint, just the suggestion of a heel, the impression of weight shifting forward, too large to be Noah's, too fresh to be old. "He went this way," Rowan said quietly. But then he noticed something else, a second impression beside it, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. A smaller mark, almost circular, almost nothing, but not nothing. "A knee print," Harris murmured, seeing it too. A child might kneel, a child might stumble, a child might be set down, even briefly, but the print was shallow, light. A moment, nothing more. "He put Noah down," Rowan said, "just for a second." The thought made his stomach twist. They kept moving deeper into the woods. Rain dripped down branches, tapping against their jackets, sliding cold across their necks. The forest smelled of pine and wet soil and something else. Something metallic, faint, unsettling. At one point, a deputy's flashlight caught a low branch, with several stray fibers clinging to it. Harris plucked them carefully. Even without the lab, Rowan could tell. The fibers were gray, the same shade of the wool coat. Crane had come this way. But as they went farther, something shifted. The trail that had seemed clear at first began to scatter, splitting in directions that didn't make sense. Footprints veered left, then right, then looped back on themselves. Branches were broken high and low, as if someone had deliberately brushed against them. "He's throwing us off," Harris muttered. "He's creating fake paths." It was the kind of tactic used by people who knew how searches worked. People who had evaded pursuit before. People who understood that confusion was a weapon. A deputy radioed in that the K9 unit was struggling. The scent led forward, then cut sideways, then disappeared entirely. The dog kept circling, whining, frustrated. And in the middle of all that, the forest seemed to grow unnaturally still. No wind, no animals, just rain, and the faint hiss of radio static. Then, from somewhere far off in the trees, a single sound echoed. A distant creak, like a door hinge or a wooden structure shifting under weight. Rowan stopped walking instantly, lifting a hand to silence the others. They listened. The rain fell. A branch cracked under someone's boot, but no one moved. The sound came again, slightly louder, slightly more distinct. "Could be a cabin," Harris said, "or a shed." Rowan nodded. "Let's find it." They moved slowly now, flashlights pointed downward, breath held between each step. After about 200 yards, a silhouette emerged through the trees. A small structure, weathered wood, tin roof, crooked foundation, the kind of hunting shed built decades earlier and forgotten by time. A faint glow leaked from a crack in the boarded-up window. Rowan's pulse quickened. They approached with extreme caution, weapons drawn, breaths quiet and shallow. Rain drummed softly on the tin roof. Something clattered inside, metal against wood. Rowan signaled. Harris moved to the left. Another officer covered the right. "On my count," Rowan whispered. But before he reached one, a soft cry came from inside, barely audible, barely real, but unmistakable. A child's voice. Rowan's heart slammed into his ribs. Every muscle in his body tensed. It came again, higher this time. Fragile. Someone inside whispered sharply, "Shh!" Then silence. Rowan didn't wait. He kicked the door in. The old wood splintered inward, and officers flooded the small, dim space. The single lantern flickered. Tools hung rusted on the walls. A cot sat in the corner. But the room was empty. No adult. No child. Nothing but the lantern swinging slightly, as if someone had just been beneath it moments earlier. Harris moved to the cot and froze. "Detective, look." A blanket lay bunched on the mattress, faded blue, torn at the corner, and beside it, a small shoe. Rowan picked it up slowly, a little sneaker with stars on the sides. Noah's. Harris looked around the empty shed, disbelief tightening his jaw. "They were here. Just now." A rush of cold air blew in through a gap in the boards. Rowan turned toward it instinctively. A set of footprints, fresh, clear, large, led away from the shed in long strides. But next to them, tiny prints, Noah's size. Rowan's breath caught in his throat. "He took him," he whispered. "He took him again." The storm intensified. washing the tracks even as they watched them. But there was no question anymore. The crane was still moving, still traveling through the woods, still one step ahead of every officer searching for him. And Noah was alive. They weren't chasing a past trail anymore. They were chasing a man who was listening, watching, and adjusting with every move they made. Rowan looked into the dark path ahead, the forest swallowing the tracks one raindrop at a time. "We're close," he said. But even as he said it, a sickening realization settled in his chest. Being close wasn't the same as being on time. Rain hammered the trees as they pushed deeper into the woods, following the vanishing footprints. Rowan moved fast, but controlled, flashlight sweeping the ground for impressions that were fading with every passing second. The mud swallowed each step like the forest itself wanted to erase the path. Harris jogged beside him, breath visible in the cold. "He can't be far. Those prints were seconds old." Rowan didn't respond. He knew Harris was right. He also knew something else. Crane wasn't running blindly. He was guiding them, pulling them, choosing where to leave prints and where to let the rain take them. "This isn't just escape," Rowan muttered. "He's leading us somewhere." Harris's jaw tightened. "Why? To stall? To hide the boy?" Rowan shook his head. "No. The crane doesn't stall. He finishes." A branch snapped somewhere to their right. Not close, but too sharp to be windy. Rowan spun, weapon drawn, pointing into darkness so dense the beam of light seemed to dissolve before it reached the trees. Nothing. No movement. No silhouette. Just silence pressing against them like a held breath. They kept moving. The ground sloped downward, the roots more tangled, the air colder. Rowan could feel the shift, like they were descending into a part of the forest untouched and unwelcome. A deputy behind them stumbled. "Detective! Wait! Wait!" Rowan turned back. The deputy pointed his light at a tree. On the bark, carved roughly into the damp trunk, were 3 letters: N-O-A. The rest of the name was smeared away by rain. Harris whispered, "He made the kid carve that?" Rowan stared at the mark. The cuts were shallow, hesitant. A child had made them, under fear or pressure or both. "He wanted us to see this," Rowan said. "But why leave proof he has the boy?" Harris asked. Rowan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Crane wasn't hiding anymore. He was showing them he was in control, showing them he could stay ahead even while leaving clues behind, like breadcrumbs. A deputy shouted from up ahead, "Detective! You! Need to see this!" Rowan and Harris rushed forward, feet sinking into soft earth. The deputy's flashlight illuminated something that made Rowan's stomach drop. A rope, thin, frayed, mud-stained, tied around the base of a tree. And on the end of it, a small fabric wristband, bright yellow, with tiny printed bees. Harris exhaled sharply. "That's Noah's. His mom said he never took it off." The rope was cut, not snapped, not torn. Cleanly served. Rowan crouched, touching the end. "Knife," he said quietly. "Sharp one." The realization settled in like ice. Crane had tied Noah here. For how long, no one knew. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. He'd tied him, and then changed his mind. Or someone, or something, had forced a change. "Detective," a deputy said carefully. "Look at the ground." Rowan flicked his light downward. His heart slammed against his ribs. There were adult footprints, Crane's, no doubt, deep, angled, hurried. Then smaller footprints, Noah's. Then another set, bare footprints, wide, long. Toes spread unnaturally far apart. Not an animal, humans, but distorted. As if the person had walked barefoot for years. as if the feet had flattened and toughened and warped. Harris swallowed. "Who the hell is that?" Rowan stared at them, the shapes burned into the mud like warnings. "I don't know," he said, but he wasn't sure that was true. Because a memory surfaced, something Noah's mother told them. He said he heard footsteps outside his window, but they didn't sound like shoes. And for the first time since the case began, Rowan felt fear, not for the investigation, not for the chase, but for the boy. Because Crane wasn't alone out here, or he wasn't the only one who had taken Noah. A radio crackled suddenly, loud in the quiet. "Detective Rowan, come in. We've picked up movement on thermal, about 200 yards east of your location." Rowan grabbed the radio. "Is it one person or two?" Static. Then, "Detective, we're seeing 3 heat signatures." Harris whispered, "3?" Rowan stood slowly, eyes locked on the dark forest beyond the rope. Crane, Noah, and someone else. Someone who left barefoot tracks in the mud. Someone who moved through the woods without sound. Someone who had been here long before the police ever arrived. Rowan's voice was low, steady, but filled with something new. "Tell command we're moving in." He tightened his grip on his flashlight. Because whoever that 3rd signature is, they're not running. The forest seemed to inhale around them, the rain softening, the air colder. And Rowan realized the truth. Crane wasn't the only one leading them deeper into the woods. Something else was. The rain thinned to a cold mist as Rowan and Harris advanced toward the coordinates relayed over the radio. Every deputy spread out in a staggered line behind them, flashlights low, moving quietly despite the sucking mud beneath their boots. The forest changed here. It wasn't just the density of the trees or the rise and fall of the ground. The air itself felt wrong, heavy, damp, stale, as if it hadn't been stirred in years. Rowan noticed it immediately. The temperature dipped several degrees, enough for his breath to fog. Harris whispered, "Why is it so cold?" Rowan didn't answer because he didn't know, or maybe he did, but didn't want to say it out loud. They moved another 20 yards before the radios crackled again. "Detective Rowan, update. Multiple signatures are slowing down. Looks like they're grouping together." Rowan lifted his radio. "Copy. Any elevation?" "Yes, sir. They appear to be near the ridge drop." Rowan froze. The ridge drop wasn't just a steep incline. It was a 40-foot vertical fall into thick brush and rock. Dangerous in daylight, deadly at night. Harris muttered, "He's cornering the boy. He'll use the slope." "No," Rowan said. "Crane's not stupid. He knows the ridge is a trap for him, too." "So what's he doing?" Rowan didn't want to answer. Crane wasn't guiding Noah to escape. He was guiding Rowan. Every step, every clue, every breadcrumb had been placed with purpose. Crane wanted them here. Crane wanted an audience. A deputy ahead raised a fist. Movement. Rowan stepped forward, flashlight pointed low. The beam danced across the ground until it landed on something small and bright. A toy car. Blue. Scratched. Mud smeared. Just like the one Noah's mother said he tucked into his jacket pocket before school every morning. Harris whispered, "He dropped it." "No," Rowan said quietly. It was placed. He picked it up. It was dry, meaning it hadn't been lying in the rain. Crane had set it there minutes ago, a warning or an invitation. Before Rowan could move, another sound rose through the dripping trees, a sharp, high-pitched whine, mechanical, faint, then gone. Harris frowned. What was that? Rowan listened. Another whine, a little louder, a strange, uneven rhythm, something metallic dragging. Deputies exchanged looks. "That's not Crane," Rowan said. "He doesn't carry equipment." The sound came again and again, a slow scraping, like metal dragged across stone. Then, a low voice over the radio, shaken. "Detective, the thermal just changed." Rowan's pulse spiked. "Changed? How?" The operator hesitated. "Yes, sir. We lost one signature." Harris's face drained. "Lost? What do you mean, lost?" "Two remain stationary. One vanished completely." Rowan's breath tightened. No thermal signature meant one of two things. Noah had dropped below elevation into a colder pocket, or something warm-blooded had stopped breathing entirely. Rowan forced his voice steady. "Which signature disappeared?" A pause that felt like a punch. "We believe it was the adult male closest to the child." Rowan exhaled. "Crane. Gone. But how?" Thermals didn't just blink out unless the body fell into water or into a void so deep the temperature difference made it invisible. Rowan looked up toward the ridge drop. 30 yards away, Noah's footprint, Crane's footprint, and beside them, those barefoot prints. Harris whispered, "Should we pull back? Regroup with the secondary team?" Rowan shook his head slowly. "If Crane's down, we have seconds. Noah is up there with someone." Harris swallowed. "With what, Rowan?" Rowan didn't answer. He didn't have to, because the scraping sound was back, closer now, coming from the ridge. Deputies tightened weapons, lights flashing upward. Then, a silhouette moved along the ridge edge, fast, crouched, almost gliding. Too thin, too long, limbs moving with unnatural articulation. Harris jerked his flashlight up fully. "Contact! On the ridge!" But by the time the beam hit the tree line, the shape was gone. Rowan sprinted forward, ignoring the shouts behind him, as deputies scrambled to follow. His boots skidded on wet leaves as he climbed the incline, each step sending mud sliding behind him. "Rowan, slow down!" Harris yelled. But he couldn't. If Crane was down, the boy was alone. And the thing that moved along the ridge wasn't protecting him. It was waiting. Rowan reached the top and froze. The ridge was empty, silent, until a small voice trembled from the darkness ahead. "Help!" Rowan felt the air leave his lungs. "Noah, help!" Then something whispered behind him. Not Noah. Something too low, too close, too human, and not human at all. A whisper shaped like breath, but not language. Rowan turned sharply, flashlight swinging, and saw eyes. Not glowing, not animalistic, just watching, wide, human, but wrong, too still, too unflickering. Set into a face he couldn't see, only sense. Rowan raised his weapon. "Show your hands!" The eyes didn't blink, didn't move, just watched him, unbothered, unbroken, as if he were the intruder here. And then they vanished. Not by movement, by absence. Like the dark swallowed them whole. Rowan stepped back, heart racing. "Detective!" Harris shouted from below. "We've got new movement, multiple units inbound." But Rowan barely heard him, because the whisper came again. Soft, close. "He's not alone." The voice was small, frightened, familiar. "Noah." Rowan turned toward the sound and saw a small hand appear from behind a tree, mud-covered, shaking, reaching. "Noah," Rowan whispered, reaching back. But before their fingers touched, something pulled the boy's hand sharply back into the darkness, impossibly fast. Rowan lunged forward. "Noah!" The forest erupted into motion, branches snapping, footsteps pounding, deputies yelling, radios screaming. And Rowan realized with cold clarity. They weren't chasing Crane anymore. They were chasing something older, something hidden, something that had taken children before and never been caught. Rowan tore through the trees, branches whipping against his arms as he sprinted after the sound. Deputies scrambled behind him, beams of white light slicing through the darkness, but the forest absorbed them like nothing wanted to be found. "Noah!" Rowan shouted, voice raw. No answer. Only the rush of movement ahead, fast, deliberate, not stumbling like a child being dragged. More like something guiding him, hurting him. Harris caught up, breath ragged. "Where is he? Rowan, where is he?" Rowan didn't slow. "He's moving north, toward the old utility road." "That road's a dead end." "Exactly." The forest suddenly dipped, the ground dropping into a shallow ravine slick with mud. Rowan slid down, boots skidding, grabbing a root to steady himself. Harris hit the bottom a second later, deputies fanning out behind them. Then, a scream. High, thin, piercing, not pain, terror. "Noah!" Rowan bolted forward, but something about the scream didn't echo right. It didn't carry through the trees the way it should have. It folded inward, as if coming from a closed space or a hollow, a trap. Harris froze. "Rowan, wait! Listen." The forest went unnaturally still. No wind, no rain, no movement of animals. Silence hung like a noose. Then a faint sound drifted through the dark. Ch, ch, ch. A tapping. Metal against stone. Rhythmic. Patient. Rowan recognized it instantly. "The scrape we heard earlier," he whispered. "It wasn't an animal." Harris's eyes widened. It was signaling. A deputy's radio crackled, scaring everyone half to death. "Detective, we've regained thermal signatures. 2. Small cluster, stationary." Rowan exhaled shakily. "Coordinates?" The operator responded. "Detective, it's underground." Rowan's blood went cold. Harris shook his head. "Underground? How the hell?" "There are old tunnels," Rowan said. "Storm drains, utility shafts from the 90s. Crane would know them. But the third signature, the thing with the bare feet, does it know them too?" Rowan didn't answer. Because deep down, he feared the tunnels didn't belong to Crane at all. They belonged to whatever else lived in this forest. One of the deputies called out, "Detective, found something." Rowan and Harris rushed over. The deputy pointed his flashlight at a slab of metal half buried in leaves, rusted, rectangular, with a thick latch bolted to one side. A hatch. Rowan crouched, wiping mud off the surface. Letters faintly emerged beneath years of corrosion. "County drain access. Do not enter." Harris stared. "No one said anything about a drain access out here?" "Because it shouldn't be here," Rowan said. "This area was redrawn after the fire. These hatches were supposed to be sealed." A long pause passed. Then Harris whispered what everyone was thinking. "So who opened it?" Rowan grabbed the latch. It lifted too easily. Someone had opened it recently. Fresh mud clung to the hinges. The smell rising from below was damp, stale, metallic. Air that hadn't seen daylight in years. The tapping sound came again. Ch, 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 echoing up the tunnel like a message, mocking them. Rowan flicked on his flashlight and aimed it down the shaft. Stairs descended into pitch black, water dripping steadily onto rusted metal. Far below, the beam caught a glint of something moving. Breathing, slow, deliberate, not human. Rowan felt the hair on his arms stand. Harris whispered, "He took the boy in there?" Rowan nodded slowly. "He didn't take him." "What do you mean?" "He offered him." The deputies behind them shifted uneasily. Rowan continued. "Crane wasn't leading Noah away from us. He was leading him to something else. something he's been feeding for years. A deputy swallowed. Detective, you're saying Crane wasn't the one who took those other missing kids? Rowan's jaw tightened. No, Crane was just the collector. Harris stepped back. Then who's the taker? Rowan aimed his flashlight deeper into the tunnel. Something shifted far below, moving with purpose. Then, a second sound rose through the shaft. A breath, long, deep, wet, like lungs that had never learned to breathe fresh air. And beneath that, a whimper, tiny, familiar. Noah, Rowan whispered. He grabbed the rung of the ladder. Everyone form a perimeter. Harris, you're with me. Harris's eyes widened. We're going down there? Rowan stared into the black. We don't have a choice. The forest above them seemed to tighten, listening, watching. Something below exhaled again, hungrier this time. Rowan placed his foot on the first rung, metal slick with moisture, and descended into the dark. The ladder groaned under Rowan's weight as he descended, every rung vibrating with the echo of his footsteps. Harris followed close behind, breath shallow, eyes locked on the darkness below them. The deputies remained above, forming a tight perimeter, beams of light slicing across the forest floor. Rowan's flashlight illuminated the cramped shaft, rusted metal walls slick with moisture, thick pipes overhead dripping steadily. The air grew colder with every step down, heavy with the smell of earth and stagnant water. 20 feet, 30, 40. The tapping sound echoed again. Ch, ch, ch. But now Rowan heard something underneath it. A tremor, a breath, a faint scrape like bone across stone. He couldn't tell if it was ahead of them or behind. At 60 feet, the ladder ended. Rowan stepped onto a narrow concrete platform, flashlight sweeping across a long, curved tunnel. The walls were old, older than the hatch, older than the drain system. Brickwork partially collapsed, twisted by tree roots forcing their way through cracks. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was forgotten. Harris climbed off the ladder, one hand gripping the wall to steady himself. Jesus, how far does this go? Rowan tilted his light down the tunnel. Long enough for something to live here. They heard movement, not a single sound this time, but several. A scuttle, a shift, like multiple limbs repositioning in the dark. Rowan motioned for Harris to kill his flashlight. Harris hesitated, then clicked it off. Rowan did the same. The darkness was absolute. Breathing was the only sound, Rowan's, steady, Harris's jagged. Then, slowly, Rowan's eyes adjusted just enough to make out something. A faint glow at the far end of the tunnel, soft, blue-white, flickering. Harris whispered, "Detective, what is that?" Rowan didn't understand at first. Then he realized it was movement, something reflecting their entrance, something retreating deeper into the tunnel, carrying light, a small flashlight, Noah's flashlight. The beam bobbed unsteadily, as if held by a trembling hand. "Noah!" Rowan shouted, voice echoing across the pipes. "I'm coming to you! Stay where you are!" For a split second, the light stopped moving. Then another sound answered, one Rowan had dreaded. A low hum, almost a growl. Human but wrong, vibrating the walls like the tunnel itself was responding. Rowan flicked his flashlight back on. "Move," he whispered, and they began down the tunnel. Their lights bounced off old warning labels, rusted metal doors, and thick cables long dead. The smell worsened. Rot mixed with something chemical, something industrial, painful to breathe in. "Doesn't make sense," Harris murmured. "Crane couldn't build something like this." "He didn't," Rowan said. "He just used it." "For what?" Rowan swept his beam across the ceiling. Claw marks, deep, carved into metal. Some new enough to shine. Something lived here? Something big enough to drag its hands across steel? Rowan tightened his grip on his pistol. For offering. Harris stopped. Offering? Offering what? Rowan didn't answer, because he suddenly saw something on the ground. A shoe. Small, red, mud-covered. Noah's. But 10 feet ahead, the ground changed. No longer concrete, but dirt. Looser, disturbed, as if something had been dragged or buried. Rowan crouched, touching the soil. It was soft, recently turned. The beam of his flashlight shook, just barely, when he spotted a small imprint, a handprint, a child's. Pressed into the dirt like someone had tried to push themselves up. Harris knelt too, voice trembling. He fell here, or he was pulled. Not just him, Rowan whispered, because beside the small handprint was a much larger one. A bare hand, long fingers, wide palm, impossibly wide. Harris stared. Human? No, Rowan said. He didn't know why he said it so quickly, but every part of him understood it. Something human-shaped, human-sized, but not human. Ahead of them, the tunnel dipped into a lower chamber. Rowan felt the air thin, the smell intensified. His flashlight trembled as he stepped toward it. Something moved inside the chamber. Then, a voice, small, echoing. Help! Rowan surged forward. Harris grabbed his arm. Rowan! Wait! But Rowan ripped free. He sprinted into the chamber and stopped dead. The chamber opened into a wide circular space supported by rusted beams. Old machinery lined the walls, broken, corroded, long dead. Water pooled across the floor, reflecting faint beams of their flashlights. But what froze Rowan wasn't the room. It was Crane, Albert Crane. Lying face up in the water, eyes open, mouth slack, neck at an impossible angle. Dead, not recently, not peacefully. He had been dropped here, thrown. Harris whispered, If he's dead, then who took the boy? Rowan scanned the chamber, breath quickening. Noah, he called. The boy's voice answered, farther now, deeper in the darkness. Help me! And just as Rowan moved toward the sound, a figure stepped out from behind an old boiler, tall, thin, barefoot, its skin pale, stretched, almost translucent in the light, its limbs too long, its movements too smooth, its eyes, its eyes, human, but hollow, like they had forgotten how to be alive. Rowan raised his weapon, muscles locking. Stop! Hands where I can see them. The creature tilted its head, not curious, not afraid, just aware. Then it smiled, a slow, unnatural stretch of the mouth. Harris staggered back. Rowan? Rowan didn't blink. Back up, slowly. But the creature didn't attack. It stepped aside, revealing Noah, curled in a corner, shaking, eyes wide. Alive. Alive. Rowan's heart slammed. Noah! I'm coming! Don't move! The child reached out weakly. Please! Rowan took one step forward, and the creature moved, not toward him, not toward Noah, toward the wall, where it vanished. Through a gap so narrow only something built for the dark could slip through. Rowan lunged, but the gap was too tight, a slit between rusted metal plates. No human could follow. The creature disappeared deeper underground, silent as breath. Rowan dropped to his knees beside Noah, lifting him gently into his arms. It's okay, he whispered, voice cracking. I've got you. You're safe now. But Noah didn't look relieved. He clutched Rowan's sleeve, eyes locked on the gap where the creature had escaped. No, Noah whispered, voice trembling. Rowan brushed the boy's hair back. It's gone. It can't hurt you. Noah shook his head violently. It's never gone. Rowan's stomach sank. Never? He whispered. Noah's eyes filled with tears. It's been here since before him. Rowan froze. Before who, Noah? The boy swallowed. Before Crane. The chamber creaked. The walls groaned. Water rippled around their feet. Something far below them exhaled. And Rowan understood. Whatever Crane had been doing for years, whatever he worshipped, whatever he fed, he didn't invent it. He found it, and it wasn't finished. Rowan held Noah tighter, feeling the child's trembling seep into his own bones. Harris knelt beside them, scanning the chamber with his flashlight, trying to understand what they were looking at, or what had just looked back at them. The water around Crane's corpse rippled again, though nothing had touched it. A draft of cold air pushed through the chamber, as if something massive had just passed through a deeper tunnel. Rowan felt it brush his skin, cold enough to sting. Harris whispered, "We need to move. Now." Rowan nodded, lifting Noah into his arms. The boy was cold, soaked, his face streaked with dirt, but conscious, alive. Rowan had expected relief to flood through him. It didn't, because Noah wasn't acting like a child saved from a monster. He was acting like a child who knew the monster wasn't gone. Rowan stood up slowly, eyes locked on the narrow gap where the creature had vanished. "We're getting out of here. Harris, lead the way." Harris started toward the tunnel entrance, but Noah clutched Rowan's jacket with sudden, panicked strength. "No," Noah whispered. "Not that way." Rowan crouched again. "Why? The ladder is that way. We go up and out." Noah shook his head violently, tears streaming. "That's where it waits. It waits for people to go back." Rowan felt a coldness spread through his chest. Harris frowned. "It waits? For who?" "For anyone who leaves," Noah whispered. Rowan swallowed hard. "Did Crane tell you that?" Noah's eyes flicked to Crane's lifeless body, broken, soaked, twisted in the water. "He showed me," the boy whispered. Rowan exchanged a tense glance with Harris. Harris stepped closer. "Rowan, what does he mean? Showed him what?" Before Rowan could answer, Noah turned his head and pointed toward another section of the chamber, a far corner, half submerged in shallow water. His voice was barely a breath. "It let us see." Rowan aimed his flashlight. The beam landed on shapes. At first he thought they were stones. Then his mind snapped into clarity. They weren't stones. They were fingers. Skeletal. Small. Human. 20, maybe 30 tiny bones, arranged in the shape of a hand. And beside them, another. And another. Some were scattered, some lined up neatly, and some were still wrapped in decaying scraps of children's sleeves. Harris stepped back, hand covering his mouth. "What the hell?" he whispered. Rowan felt his pulse thundering in his ears. The creature wasn't feeding on children. It was collecting pieces, keeping them, like trophies, like warnings, or like something else. Noah tugged his sleeve again. "It takes something from everyone." Rowan crouched down to meet Noah's eyes. "Takes what, Noah? Tell me." The boy's lips trembled. "Whatever makes them people." Rowan froze. Before he could process that, something deeper in the tunnels boomed. Once, like a giant door slamming shut. Dust rained from the ceiling. The water rippled violently. Harris raised his weapon. "We need to go now!" Rowan nodded. "Okay. Noah, we're going back to the ladder, but we'll be fast. You stay with me and don't look anywhere else. Understand?" Noah didn't answer. He stared toward the dark opening where the creature disappeared. "It doesn't like the light," he whispered. Good, Rowan said. We'll blind it if it comes near. Noah looked up slowly, fear hollowing his eyes even further. But it doesn't need the dark, the boy whispered. It makes its own. Harris grabbed Rowan's arm. Detective, look. Rowan turned, and his stomach twisted. At the tunnel entrance, the one they had come through, darkness was spreading. Not shadows, not lack of light, but a blackness that seemed to move. A thick, crawling veil rolling along the ceiling like smoke underwater. It swallowed the beams of their flashlights as easily as a bucket snuffs a candle. Harris stepped back, panic rising. Rowan, what the hell is that? Noah buried his face against Rowan's chest. It's coming. Rowan didn't hesitate. Move! They darted toward the ladder shaft, but the darkness reached faster, spilling down the tunnel, not like a fog, but like something hunting, sensing them. Rowan clutched Noah and ran, Harris right behind him, boots splashing through the water. The tunnel trembled again, loud, violent, metal groaning, pipes shuddering, beams vibrating. Rowan could feel it chasing them. The cold, the pressure, the weight of something crawling through the dark. Not footsteps, not breathing, something sliding, something huge. Harris shouted, It's blocking the tunnel! Rowan looked back and saw it. The darkness had shape now, not a creature, not a shadow, but both. A silhouette forming inside the black veil. Long limbs, wide shoulders, the same eyes he'd seen above ground, watching, following. Rowan reached the ladder and shoved Noah upward. Climb! Climb now! Harris covered them, firing twice into the shifting dark. The bullets vanished inside it. No ricochet, no impact, just swallowed. Rowan pushed Noah up the ladder, every muscle shaking. Harris fired again, breath smoking in the cold air. But the darkness didn't retreat. It surged. Fast, too fast. Harris screamed, Rowan, move! Rowan grabbed the ladder and climbed, shoving Noah ahead of him. Harris scrambled behind, and for a moment Rowan thought they might actually outrun it. Then something hit the ladder. Hard. The entire shaft shook. Rowan nearly slipped. Harris screamed behind him, hands clawing for the rungs. The darkness surged up the shaft like a rising tide. Noah sobbed above him. It's coming! It's coming! It's coming! Rowan looked down and saw a pale hand reach up through the blackness. Long fingers, skin stretched, nails cracked, grabbing the ladder, pulling, climbing. After them, the ladder groaned under their combined weight as Rowan shoved Noah upward, each rung slick beneath his hands. Harris climbed just beneath Rowan, boots slipping as he pushed himself up with pure terror-fueled strength. Below them, that hand kept climbing, slow at first, then faster, too fast for anything human. Rowan yelled upward, Noah! Keep moving! Don't stop! The boy scrambled, small hands slipping but catching, sobbing with each breath. The dim light from the hatch above grew brighter as they climbed. They were close, 20 feet, maybe less. And then the ladder jolted again. Harris screamed, It's pulling! Rowan! It's pulling the ladder down! The metal groaned, twisting, bending inward, as the thing below yanked the structure, like it weighed nothing at all. The bolts screamed against the concrete. One shot free, ricocheting off the wall past Rowan's ear. Harris! Move! Rowan shouted. But Harris didn't move. His foot slipped, and something grabbed his ankle. Harris let out a ragged animal scream as the pale hand clamped around him, fingers curling with impossible strength. No! 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 Harris clawed at the rung, eyes wide with terror. Rowan, don't let it! Don't let it take me! Rowan climbed down 2 rungs instinctively, towards him, toward the darkness he couldn't see but could hear breathing below them. Hang on! Rowan yelled. He reached for Harris's wrist. Harris reached back. Their fingertips brushed. Then the creature pulled. The ladder shook violently. Harris's grip slipped. His flashlight fell, spiraling downward into the black until it vanished entirely. Rowan! Harris screamed. Please, please, don't let go! Rowan grabbed Harris's arm, held on with everything he had, but the force below was too strong. It was like trying to pull someone away from a vacuum, a pit of gravity, a tide pulling everything downward. Rowan gritted his teeth, muscles straining, veins popping. Fight it! Harris, fight it! I'm trying. The creature jerked again. Hard, Harris's fingers slipped out of Rowan's grip. No! 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 Harris! Rowan shouted. Harris's scream echoed through the tunnel, raw, terrified, fading as he was ripped downward into the darkness. And then, silence. Not even a thud, not even splash. Just gone. Rowan froze, breath heaving, arm trembling from where Harris had been. Noah sobbed above him. Please, please, go, please go. The ladder shook again. Rowan snapped back into motion, climbing fast, every muscle burning. The hatch was only 10 feet away now. 8, 6. The darkness surged up the shaft again, swallowing the walls, swallowing the rungs below him. Rowan climbed harder. Noah, push the hatch. Open! I can't. It's stuck, Rowan nearly screamed in frustration. Put your whole body into it. Noah shoved, grunting, crying. The hatch creaked, a long metallic whine, and finally burst open, letting in a flood of cold night air from above. Rowan climbed the last rungs, muscles screaming. He threw Noah upward, and the boys scrambled into the open forest. Rowan grabbed the top edge of the hatch of frame and pulled himself up. But something grabbed his boot. Not a hand, something larger, a whole arm. Pale, too long. Fingers wrapping around his ankle like a steel trap. Rowan yelled, kicking violently. Noah, run! Noah didn't run. He ran back to Rowan. Without hesitation, the child grabbed Rowan's jacket, pulling with everything his small body had. Rowan kicked again, hard, and his boots slipped off entirely, ripped from his foot and dragged into the darkness. He lunged upward, fingers scraping dirt, dragging himself out of the shaft just as the darkness erupted upward like a living wave. He slammed the hatch with Noah's help. The metal rang like a bell. Something hit it from below. Hard. The hatch jumped. Rowan and Noah both fell backward into the mud, shaking, drenched in sweat and rain. The hatch thudded again, then silence. No movement, only Rowan's heartbeat thundering in his ears. Noah crawled into his lap, burying his face in Rowan's chest, shaking uncontrollably. Rowan wrapped his arms around him, staring at the hatch as if it might burst open at any second. His voice was barely a whisper. Harris. He stared at the place where his friend had vanished. No sound came from below, only the quiet breathing of the forest around them, as if nothing had happened. Noah lifted his face, eyes red and glistening. It never takes just once, he whispered. Rowan felt ice drip down his spine. What do you mean? Noah swallowed hard. It always comes back. Rowan held the boy tighter, heart pounding like a war drum against his ribs. Because he knew, without question, Noah wasn't warning him. He was telling him what he'd already seen, what Crane had already learned, and what was coming next. For a long time, Rowan couldn't move. He sat in the mud with Noah clutched against him, staring at the hatch like it might explode open. Every instinct screamed for him to run, drag the boy, call for backup, get as far from this place as possible. But he couldn't, because Harris's last scream was still echoing in his head, and because the forest was too quiet. Deputies stood several yards away, stunned into silence. They had heard the noise, the metallic slamming from below, the muffled cries, the monstrous scrapes vibrating through the earth. Their faces were pale, eyes fixed on the hatch, as if expecting it to rise on its own. One deputy finally whispered, "Detective, what was that?" Rowan didn't answer. He didn't have one. Another stepped forward cautiously. "Where's Sergeant Harris? Did he make it out?" Rowan closed his eyes. Noah's fingers tightened around his jacket. "He's gone," Rowan forced out. A cold, heavy silence fell over the clearing. Not disbelief, not confusion, just dread. Because whatever had taken Harris, they had all heard it. Rowan lifted his radio with a shaking hand. "Dispatch, this is Detective Rowan. Immediate emergency evac at our location. I have the boy. Repeat, I have Noah Briggs. We need medics and full tactical support." He paused, voice tightening. "And we need the area sealed." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Detective. ETA 7 minutes. 7 minutes. 7 minutes felt like an eternity when something was waiting just 6 feet below their boots. Rowan pulled himself together, rising to his feet while keeping Noah in his arms. Deputies formed a tight circle, weapons drawn, eyes trained on the hatch. "Move back," Rowan commanded quietly. "No sudden noise. Stay alert." They retreated toward the tree line. Halfway there, Noah whispered something so soft, Rowan barely heard it. "It's listening." Rowan froze mid-step. "Who?" he asked quietly. Noah didn't look at him. He kept staring at the hatch. "The other one." A chill slithered up Rowan's spine. "Noah, what other one?" "The one that didn't go back down." Rowan's pulse spiked. "What do you mean? Where is it?" Noah didn't answer. He didn't have to. A twig snapped in the woods. Not behind them, not in the tunnel. Ahead, toward the deputy vehicles. Rowan turned slowly, flashlight sweeping through the trees. Branches swayed, leaves rustled. Then a shape shifted between the trunks, just for a heartbeat, tall, thin, still, watching them. Rowan's breath caught, not moving, not charging, just observing. Noah pressed his face into Rowan's chest. "It followed us out." Before Rowan could respond, another radio crackled from a deputy's shoulder. "ETA, 4 minutes." 4 minutes. Rowan didn't wait. He tightened his grip on Noah and motioned for the deputies to form up. "We're pulling out," Rowan said. "Eyes everywhere. Stay tight." They moved quickly but quietly toward the vehicles. Every sound made Rowan flinch, every shifting branch, every breath of wind. But nothing attacked. Nothing moved closer. It only watched. Through the trees, through the dark, with those hollow, impossible eyes. When they reached the vehicles, Rowan lifted Noah into the back of a cruiser and shut the door gently. The boy grabbed the window, staring at the forest with a kind of terrified longing. Rowan knelt beside the door. "Noah, you're safe now. Do you understand? You're safe." Noah blinked slowly. "No one is safe." Rowan swallowed. "That thing is staying down there. We're sealing the hatch. We're ending this." Noah shook his head, not scared, certain. "You can't end it." Rowan's jaw clenched. "Why not?" Noah's voice was barely a whisper. "Because it didn't start with us." Rowan leaned closer. "Then who did it start with?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Crane wasn't the first one to feed it." Rowan felt the bottom of his stomach drop. Before he could ask more, the clearing lit up with flashing lights as backup units arrived. Medics, tactical teams, floodlights cutting through the trees. For a moment, Rowan allowed himself to breathe. Help was here. The nightmare was ending. Then, a deputy shouted from the perimeter, "Detective, we have movement!" Rowan spun toward the forest line. Dozens of lights turned that direction. Branches shook. A tall silhouette stepped out of the woods. Then another, and another. Rowan's blood turned to ice, because these weren't the creature. These were people. Barefoot, covered in dirt, thin, gray-skinned, eyes vacant, as if they had lived underground for years or decades. Deputies raised weapons instantly. "Stand down!" Rowan yelled. "Don't fire unless fired upon." But the figures didn't approach. They stood between the trees like statues, watching, silent, waiting. Noah's small hand pressed against the window. "They're not here to hurt us," he whispered shakily. Rowan's voice barely worked. "Then why are they here?" Noah looked up at him. "To make sure we don't go back." The forest held its breath. Backup teams froze. The barefoot figures blinked in eerie unison. Then, every one of them turned and walked back into the forest, silent, vanishing between the trees as though swallowed by the night. Rowan stood rooted in place, unable to speak. Not because the figures disappeared, but because the hatch behind him rumbled. Once, softly, like something inside was waiting, trying again, trying still. And Rowan understood something horrifying. The creature wasn't trapped. It allowed itself to be sealed, because it knew exactly where it could go next. The forest went still after the barefoot figures disappeared. So still it felt staged, like the world was holding its breath. Rowan kept one hand on his holster and the other on the handle of Noah's door, as if the child might be pulled away at any second. Deputies formed a tight perimeter. Floodlights were switched on. Radios crackled, orders passed back and forth. Medics rushed toward the boy. Tactical officers moved toward the hatch with reinforced plates and sealing equipment. Rowan didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the trees, on the place where the strange, hollow-eyed people had slipped away. He'd expected fear, panic, maybe an attack. Not that, not silent. Warning. A medic approached him gently. "Detective, we need to check the boy." Rowan nodded, stepping aside as the medic opened the cruiser door. Noah gripped the seat belt with white knuckles, staring past the medic toward the hatch like it was calling him. Rowan crouched beside him. "You're okay. They're sealing it now." Noah shook his head slowly. "It doesn't matter." Rowan tried to keep his voice steady. "It does matter. They're welding it shut. No one goes in, nothing comes out." Noah looked up at him with a gaze older than a 4-year-old child should ever have. "It's not stuck down there." The words hit Rowan like a cold blade. "Then where is it, Noah?" The boy's lip quivered. Tears filled his eyes. "It moves. It knows the tunnels. All of them," Rowan swallowed. "Tunnels?" "They go everywhere," Noah whispered. "Everywhere under the town, under houses, under stores, under roads." The medic froze. Rowan felt his mouth go dry. "How do you know that?" Noah looked toward the hatch. "It showed me." A deputy ran up, breathless. "Detective, the engineers need you. Something's not right with the hatch." Rowan stood immediately. "What now?" The deputy swallowed. "You better see for yourself." Rowan approached the hatch cautiously. Tactical officers stood around it, welding equipment laid out but untouched. The steel cover sat flat on the ground. It wasn't moving. It wasn't shaking. It wasn't making a sound. but the ground around it was warm. Rowan knelt, placing a gloved hand on the earth surrounding the hatch. It wasn't warm. It was hot. Like a machine was running beneath it. Like something massive had passed through. Like something had gone deeper. One of the engineers pointed at a handheld thermal device. "Detective, the heat is moving." Rowan looked at him sharply. "Moving where?" The engineer hesitated, then tilted the screen so Rowan could see. A bright cluster of heat was slithering through the underground layout. Down the tunnels, away from the hatch, toward town. Rowan's breath caught. "How fast is it moving?" The engineer tapped the screen. "Faster than a person. Much faster." "Direction?" A long pause. "Northwest." Rowan felt the world tilt under his feet. Northwest was the direction back to town, back to neighborhoods, back to families, back to children asleep in their beds. A deputy whispered, "Detective, we need to alert the sheriff, the mayor, everyone. If something's coming up from the tunnels..." Rowan held up a hand. His mind was spinning, racing to keep up with a truth he didn't want to accept. Crane wasn't the monster. Crane didn't create the creature. Crane only fed it. Someone before him had to. And someone before that. And someone before that. The barefoot figures, the missing bones. The creature that moved without sound. This forest had been feeding it for decades, maybe for centuries. Rowan's radio crackled violently. "Detective Rowan, come in. Urgent call from the station." He grabbed it. "Go." Static. Then, "Detective, we've got movement in the storm drains near Main Street. Multiple reports of sounds under the pavement." Rowan's throat tightened. "What kind of sounds?" "A beat. Scraping, tapping, echoing, and crying." "Crying?" "Sir, crying like a child." Noah's head snapped up inside the cruiser, as if he heard it through the radio, through the forest, through the earth itself. Rowan turned towards the floodlit trees surrounding them. This case was solved. But the nightmare was not over. He spoke into the radio. "Lock down the town. Every street, every storm drain. No one goes anywhere alone." "Copy, Detective. Should we call state police? National Guard?" Rowan stared at the glowing heat signature on the engineer's tablet, crawling invisibly beneath the ground like blood through veins. "Yes," he said quietly. "Call everyone." Noah stepped out of the cruiser, his voice trembling. "Detective?" Rowan crouched. "Yes, buddy?" Noah pointed toward the dark woods, toward the direction the creature had gone. "It's looking for another one." Rowan's stomach dropped. "Another child?" Noah shook his head. "No." He looked up at Rowan. "Another feeder." The sound of distant sirens rose in the air, approaching, urgent, unaware of what waited underground. Rowan stood slowly, staring toward town. Because solving the cold case meant uncovering the truth. And the truth was worse than anyone had imagined. The creature wasn't hunting children. It was hunting a replacement. And it had just lost Crane,